Welcome to Week 7 of Engineering Weekly. I'm your friendly host, Dr. Meikenstein. This week is the final episode in the first season, and today we're going to be talking about mastering. If you're going to record and mix your own song, I do not recommend mastering it as well. It is always a good idea to have at least one extra set of ears in one of the phases throughout production, because that other person is going to probably hear some things that maybe you didn't hear. But for demonstration purposes only, I have mastered this song that I have also mixed and recorded. Only for demonstration purposes, though. Before we start mastering, though, I would like to note that I decided to go back to the mix and make a couple minor changes because I wasn't really happy with the sound. And what I'm talking about in particular is I thought that the track had some mud to it, and I didn't want to have to rely on mastering to fix it. I wanted to fix it in the mix. So what I did was I went back and I worked on the overhead cymbals. And the reason why I approached the cymbals when looking to get rid of mud is because in the context of a mix, the most important element is the drums, aside from maybe the vocals, but arguably the drums even more so, because if you don't have banging drums, your mix, no matter what you do, is not going to sound awesome. So the drums, I feel, are the most important thing. And what I was using originally to EQ the drum overheads was the EQ on the Midas Venice 240 mixing board that I have. But I realized that that wasn't doing a good enough job for me, because in order to get rid of what I heard as mud, I had to make big EQ changes. And when you're using an active EQ like the ones that are on the Midas board, it tends to make things sound a little harsh, in my opinion. And it sounds like it was EQ'd. So I knew that what I needed to do was use a passive EQ. Unfortunately, my EQ that's passive, the one that I built, is mono. And overheads obviously are stereo. So I didn't run it through the passive EQ for that reason, mainly because it would take too long. But I decided in retrospect it was worth it. Let's go back. I summed the left and the right overheads into a mono signal and ran it through the EQ to get the sound that I was looking for. Once I was happy with that, then I went back and I actually processed the left channel on its own and then the right channel. And I ended up with a stereo image. It took twice as long as it would have if I had a stereo EQ. Anyway, I ended up doing it that way. I EQ'd the left and the right channel separately, but with the exact same settings on the EQ. That gave me the sound that I was looking for. If you go to the link that I'm providing for you, you can download the original mix from episode 6, but you can also download the updated mix that I'm using for this mastering in episode 7. Now, down to mastering. So what I did was I used my passive EQ once again. Unfortunately, like I said, with mixing, it's only a mono EQ. So to use it for mastering, you have to run the left channel through first and then the right channel, or vice versa. But you have to process the left and the right channels separately. So it's kind of a drawback because it takes longer, but you end up with the same results in the end. Basically, how I have the EQ set up is it's basically a shelf on the high frequencies, and I'm reducing the high frequencies by quite a bit. So the shelf kind of starts at around 4K and it goes all the way up. It's 22 dB that I'm subtracting from the high frequencies, but I'm also boosting with a bell at 18K by about 8 dB. All this is done with a passive EQ, so it doesn't really make things sound unnatural when you make big changes with EQ. Unlike a normal EQ or a plugin, if you're going to make drastic changes with a normal active EQ that's hardware or with a plugin, you're going to drastically change the sound, oftentimes in a negative way, mainly because you're throwing off the phase coherency of different frequencies, and with op amps involved, you're just adding a lot of extra color to the sound. And in a mastering sense, I'm not looking for color. I had the color that I was looking for when I was mixing. So now I kind of want to just make that mix sound a little bit cleaner maybe, and a little bit louder. With the low frequencies, there was just a little bit of mud still, but it wasn't a lot, so I just needed to take out a touch. And I did that by subtracting, with this EQ, it's kind of a real gradual low cut, and I have it set at 300 hertz. I'm not taking a lot out, so it's not like a hard cut or anything. It's like 1 decibel per octave kind of thing. It's a real gradual cut. And then I'm boosting some of the sub bass. It's around 58 hertz. I'm boosting, and not by very much, only by about 2 dB, just to add a little bit more low end from what I took out. So if you were to look at it in a graph sense, you would see there's a little bit of a dip in the low end where it goes into the low mids, and then there's another dip in the high end that starts probably around 2K and reaches its deepest point probably around 5 or 6K, and then it picks up again after I processed both the left and the right channels through the passive EQ, the Massey L2007. So I used that plugin, and I wasn't trying to squash it to death. I wanted to preserve some dynamic range and maintain as much clarity as possible. I'm not going to be that guy that's part of the volume wars. Screw that. Don't destroy the music that you've worked so hard to create by over-compressing it. It is unnecessary and it is undesirable. So don't do it. Anyway, download the tracks, post your results as comments here on YouTube, or as download links, or whatever you want to do. You can create video responses if you do a mix or a mastering, and show it off. I would like to see it, and so would everybody else. So do your best and get it up here.